So continuing on with our exegesis of Isaiah 58, remember the context of this chapter is within the final section of the book, which outlines God's strategy for restoring Israel while addressing those who reject him. God is speaking to his people, Israel, through the prophet Isaiah. As we mentioned last week, the core problem addressed in this chapter is the hypocrisy and ritualistic fasting of the people in an attempt to manipulate God. The spiritual failure is that these people maintain outward religious observance while remaining indifferent to others' suffering and indifferent to God himself. They are wanting covenant benefits without covenant responsibilities. God calls them the house of Jacob purposely to remind the people of Israel of their identity as descendants of the patriarch Jacob, thus emphasizing their covenant relationship with God. It is a call to return to true, heartfelt righteousness rather than hypocritical outward rituals. The chapter unfolds in three movements: an accusation grounded in the people's complaint about their fasting, and this is in verses 1 through 4. Second, an explanation of what authentic fasting entails, which is in verses 5 through 9a. And thirdly, conditional promises stating that God will deliver his people once they demonstrate genuine transformation. And that's verses 9b through 12. So, I want to look at Isaiah 58:5 really quick, because it presents rhetorical questions about external displays of religious observance, such as bowing the head like a reed and spreading sackcloth and ashes. So, it's asking whether these constitute the kind of fasting God desires. This imagery in verse 5 carries specific weight. Bowing the head like reeds, which were known to be flexible and bow in the wind, was also a symbol of weakness or fragility. Then it goes on to mention wearing mourning clothes and sitting in ashes, which were covenantal gestures of grief and contrition in ancient Israel. These outward forms were meant to symbolize humility before God, yet the prophet's questions imply they had become hollow performances, disconnected from genuine transformation. The passage then pivots sharply from what fasting is not to what fasting God actually desires. Rather than the oppressive fasting they practice, God calls them to fast by undoing wickedness, releasing the oppressed, breaking systems of exploitation, sharing with the needy, and providing shelter. God responds only to fasting that is rooted in genuine humility. First, they had to stop acting wickedly toward others, which shows us that part of getting right with God begins by stopping the evil we do to others. Then they had to start acting lovingly towards others, showing us that part of getting right with God continues by doing loving things for other people. So, God is addressing both sins of commission, which are sins that we go out and do against God, as well as sins of omission, which are things that we should have done, yet we have not. God is telling the people of Israel that when they embrace this vision of fasting, his light will illuminate them, and he will answer their prayers and restore their land. So the answer is not to stop fasting, but to get right with God and make your fasting more than superficial. As Jesus said to his people about the empty religious rituals of the Pharisees in Matthew 23:23, he said, "These you ought to have done without leaving the others undone." To have the guidance of the Lord, empty religious ritual is not enough. We need to seek God with both sincere hearts and sincere actions.